Hi, everyone. Thanks for starting off your weekend here, and let me tell you, I have three fantastic stories from listeners today. First off, we have a story from someone working at a psychiatric hospital in eastern Pennsylvania who sees and hears things that shouldn't exist. Then on to New York, where a park ranger witnesses the horror that materializes in a park cabin. And finally, a young girl manifests an invisible friend that petrifies her brother. Be sure to comment below what you think they all saw. Now let's get into the stories. Hey Lilith, I'm a huge believer in the paranormal, and I feel that if everyone experienced some of these things I have, they would be too. I'm a huge believer that any negative environment can become a portal into the spirit world if there's enough pain and trauma present. I don't think that energy goes away. I think locations hold on to the energy of everything that occurs there, like a sponge. I didn't think that way as a child. I was raised by particularly non-religious parents, but after you have a few profound experiences, you can't forget them, and they become part of you. I used to work as a janitor at a psychiatric hospital in eastern Pennsylvania. The place was just eerie in general, and unexplainable things would always happen. I'll talk about the experiences that freaked me out the most, but I could honestly write a book about all the things that happened there. Seeing shadow people move around, doors opening by themselves, objects falling off of shelves, and constantly having supplies stolen. Well, those were just about everyday occurrences. One day I was cleaning one of the bathrooms and felt a strong, menacing presence. I tried to ignore it, and I kept mopping the floors, but the feeling grew stronger and stronger. Finally, the tightness in my chest got to the point where I needed to address it. I asked if there was anybody in the bathroom with me, and immediately, all 6 of the sinks turned on. I put my hands up and I shouted, "All right, that's enough, come on now." And as soon as I said that, they all turned off. I tried to rationalize it as a sensor issue, so I said, "I bet you can't turn on just one." Without missing a beat, one of the faucets turned on full blast. I grabbed my stuff and I moved on to the next room without finishing that bathroom. That was just way too much. I told my boss about the experience. He got a funny look on his face and leaned in close and told me that I should never try to communicate with them. He said it often makes the situation worse. He said it's best to pretend they don't exist, and they'll leave you alone. They never left me alone, though. The spirits in that place probably fed off of my fear. From the first day on the job, I knew that place was seriously haunted. I felt bad for the patients there. How could you possibly find sanity in an environment like that? One night I was cleaning the offices in the bottom floor of the hospital, which is the same floor that the morgue was in. It was only me working down there at the time, and I saw this white-haired woman in white clothes running down the hall towards the morgue, which was at the end of the hallway. I yelled at her that she shouldn't be down here, that it was a restricted area, but she kept running. She slammed through the morgue doors and I took off after her, yelling at her to stop. When I got inside the morgue, there was not another living soul in there. I looked all over the place for her, but there was nobody in there. I got the hell out of there, and I will never forget that either. I don't know if that was the spirit of a patient or of a nurse, but either way, she was not at peace. I got pretty close with some of the patients there, and one of them claimed that they saw the white-haired woman all the time. He was able to describe her in vivid detail exactly as I had seen her, and that absolutely made my skin crawl. Then the next crazy thing happened to me late one night towards the end of my shift. And this is the thing that ended it all. I quit the job immediately after this. A patient had just died and I was cleaning out her room. The electronics in there were going nuts. The TV kept turning on, the lights were flickering, my vacuum kept turning off. It was just chaos. I had just about given up cleaning the room altogether and was about to leave when the door slammed shut in my face. I was terrified, and the room was completely dark. I was trying to feel around for the light switch when I heard a woman's voice say, "Where do you think you're going?" I froze and could hardly breathe. I said, "Look, I'm just trying to finish my shift and go home." I heard a laugh and the words, "You're not going home." I kept feeling around for something to defend myself, and I asked, "Where am I going then?" And then the lights came back on, and I saw the same patient who had died, and she was over by the window, staring at me. And then she said as clear as day, "You're coming with me." I booked it out of there. I had already been seriously considering quitting, but this drove me over the edge. No paycheck is worth that kind of abuse, and life is too short to constantly worry about your safety. The strange thing was that when that patient was alive, she was nice and seemed like a gentle lady. Maybe she had secret fantasies of killing me, but other than scaring the living hell out of me, it also hurt my feelings. If you're going to wish somebody harm, at least do it to their face, not behind their back. I don't know, though. If I had lived in a place like that for years, I would probably wish ill on people too. One thing's for sure, I'm so grateful I never have to go to that place ever again. The way I live my life now, if something feels off, I'm out of there. I've learned my lesson. We were all given our senses to survive, and I honestly believe that if I stayed at that job, I would be dead, even if it was just from the stress and the anxiety. I hope for anyone out there who has a job that makes their life miserable, you quit before your life passes you by. It was scary for me to leave that paycheck, and I had to move and do a lot of things to find another job. But I don't fear for my life all the time like I used to. Thank you for your videos and your wisdom, Lilith. Dear Lilith, my name is Kyle, and I've been working as a ranger in Harriman State Park in New York for about 5 years. Normally, my job entails tracking down lost hikers and busting kids with beer cans. If it's a slow day, I might just handle parking tickets or spending the afternoon at the base station. This whole summer, we'd been struggling with a boom in the black bear population, too. We've invested thousands of dollars in bear-proofing dumpsters, hazing equipment, air horns, and training sessions for park staff. But these critters just can't stay away from our group camps and patrons. They can smell a barbecue from over a mile away, and even a spray of scented sunscreen can attract them to camp. To make matters worse, many of our visitors don't clean up after themselves, and they leave their trash scattered all over the campground. Bears will dive deep into our dumpsters, break into kitchens, unlock cabinets, and even sneak into outhouses. They can stand on their hind legs and climb up trees. Well, basically what I'm saying is that I know bears. They're mostly harmless, but if you get too close, you might be in trouble. I also know raccoons, and possums, and deer, and squirrels. I know what all the animals in the park look like and how they act. I know what I saw last week was not a normal animal. I was doing a routine drive down a park road when I noticed that the door to a camp mess hall was open, and the dirt on the path was all scuffed up. Now, this was odd because no one was supposed to be at this camp since the Girl Scouts left at the end of July. I figured it was either some teenagers with spray paint or maybe a maintenance worker. So I hopped out of my truck and started walking over to the cabin. As I got closer, I started to hear some weird noises. Something metal was clanking and papers were being shuffled. It sounded like cans and boxes were falling off a shelf. And then I noticed the wet, smacking sound of something eating. All right, I think to myself, okay, I'm dealing with a bear. Or maybe a family of raccoons. So I follow protocol. I pull out my walkie-talkie so I can call for backup from the rest of my team. But the second I begin to speak, whatever is in there must have heard me, because now I can hear a terrible howling noise coming from inside the cabin kitchen. I know better than to finish my call after hearing that, so I just ducked down behind a tree. You gotta know, I'm not proud of this, but I got a family and kids at home, and I'm glad I hid because this creature starts to walk out the door. My first glimpse was its legs. They looked like tree trunks, and they were covered with a dense, dark brown fur. And the thing was huge, taller than a grown man. It had broad shoulders and bulging muscles. In my first look, I thought it could have been a bear, but once I saw its face, I knew it was something else. It looked like a man in some ways, or maybe a gorilla or a wolf. Whatever it wasn't a bear. I know it couldn't have been. Its face was hairless and its forehead was protruding, and it looked mad. This thing walked right on out of the mess hall on 2 legs, too. It peered at my truck on the road, sniffed up in the air, swung its long arms, and then ran. I tried to peer out to see where it went, but it was so fast. In a blink, it was gone. I dusted off my pants and finished calling my team. When they arrived at the camp, I started to tell them what I had seen, and they all just started laughing and saying, "Oh, well, of course Kyle saw a Bigfoot." Nobody wanted to believe me. But once we walked into the kitchen, they started to change their tune. The first thing that hit us was the smell. It was like we walked into a garbage dump that had been set on fire, and that fire was put out with skunk spray. I held my shirt up over my nose, but my pal David actually threw up once the stench hit him. Yep, true story there. The room was nearly destroyed, too. The refrigerator was flung open, and the contents were spilled all over the floor. Serves that camp right for leaving so much food in the cabin over winter. But bears can't open jars. They can't open cans. They can't smash open locked cabinets. All along the walls were scratch marks, and the whole place was a total mess. It was a terrible sight. The floor was covered in a layer of pasta sauce, relish, and marshmallows. There was a loaf of bread with a huge bite missing out of it, right through the plastic. I picked it up off the counter, but then I immediately flung it back down. My fingers were covered in this sticky slobber, and I couldn't wipe it off quickly enough. Then I looked down, and in the mess of mustard and ketchup and spoiled milk on the floor, I could actually make out a full footprint. It looked like a normal man's foot in all that gunk, but it was 3 times as large as my shoe, and I'm a size 11. I think I really did see Bigfoot, or the Yeti, or whatever you want to call it. I know what I saw. It wasn't a bear. So now we are not going to patrol as solo men anymore. Everyone is sticking together, sticking with their partner. I think it's important that we're better safe than sorry. That thing could take any of us, though. Even the bigger guys wouldn't have stood a chance. I'll keep you posted if we see any more signs of it, but I sure hope we don't. I was just a kid myself the first time my little sister told me about her pet. We all presumed it was just some imaginary playmate that she'd created since we weren't allowed pets in the apartment complex. She'd talk for hours about Doggy and how she only saw him at nighttime, and that he was her special friend. She took it quite far, too, starting to sneak bits of food out of the fridge or save bites of her supper to take out to him. We lived in a second-floor apartment. Although she wasn't allowed to go down into our shared yard where it was dark, our mom had a small balcony from her bedroom, so she'd go there to see Doggy and give him his treat. Sometimes I'd ask if I could come see him, too. She'd shake her head no, Doggy won't come if he sees anybody else. She'd tell me so seriously and solemnly that it was almost compelling. This went on for years. Sometimes there would be a complaint about some dirt having been kicked up in the yard or the trash cans knocked over. One time there were even scratch marks on the outside of the balcony. Again, Doggy got the blame. In the end, I had to know. I knew there wouldn't be any way in hell that my little sister actually had a dog that only manifested at nighttime and was somehow big enough to reach our second-floor balcony, It was absolutely 100% impossible. I also knew that she wouldn't let me go and see Doggy, so I'd just have to sneak. That evening, after supper, I clutched my belly and said I needed to visit the bathroom, and that I would be a while. I remember seeing her pocket a sausage from her plate, so I knew she was going straight out while Mom cleared the dishes. I shot out of the room, but instead of the bathroom, I raced into my mom's bedroom and hid in the closet. And then I waited. Sure enough, moments later, I heard her come in and slide open the balcony door, and then I heard her. As quietly as I could, I opened the door. I remember thinking at that point my sister should get into performance art, as the panting and snuffling noises coming from the balcony sounded very realistic. And then I saw it. Doggy. I don't know how tall it was and whether it was standing on something or strong enough to have climbed up and hung onto the railing, but I could clearly see its face in the shadows, thanks to the security light. It was definitely some kind of dog, but unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was slightly obscured by the railings, but I could make out that it was eating the leftover sausage with one of its hands. Because this dog had long arms and hands like a person, but a definite dog face, and had yellow, dull glowing eyes. Staring at my sister, I was frozen in terror. This dog thing looked like something that had been released straight from hell, yet she didn't seem one bit afraid. She'd reached through the railing and even tried to pat it. It honestly could have killed her in an instant. I could see the veins and the muscles throbbing through its giant hair, but instead, it just looked at her. Leaning over the railing, she said bye to her pet and said, "See you later." Just like that, she walked back into her mom's room, not even noticing me. I waited for another moment, and then, overcoming my fear, I tiptoed out to the balcony and peered over the railings. I heard a low growl that made my stomach turn to water. I could tell you that I really needed to use the bathroom then. The next evening, after supper, she came back to the table after going out to see this thing, what she called Doggy, with a look of disappointment. He wasn't there. Mom had ruffled her hair and said not to worry, but he never came back. Whether it was a coincidence or whether that growl was a message that he'd been betrayed or something, I don't know. But we never did have another visit, and my sister never talked about it again. I've even tried to get her to mention it, but somehow she has no idea what I'm talking about. But I know what I saw. Sometimes I have to remind myself that monsters are indeed real. I feel like I'm living in a Goosebumps book sometimes. I think the only reason that this creature was even coming around was basically because my sister was feeding it, and feeding it well. She would bring a lot of food out there. It wasn't just scraps or half a sandwich, it was a lot. This thing never acted friendly in a traditional pet sense, but it did act neutral. Again, if you're offering something a food source, it makes sense that it's going to lure it in. I'm just surprised it didn't take her, for whatever reason. Let me know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Donovan Dread, who releases almost every single day. Also, if you like true crime, then check out Donovan Dread True Crime. There are new releases several times a week.